afternoon. I'm here with Commissioner Ellis, District Clerk Marilyn Burgess, and our Elections Administrator Isabel Longoria. Before beginning, I want to thank Mayor Turner and a group of mayors who are in Washington, D.C. right now, and it's mayors from across America calling for federal voting rights legislation, and that's what we are here to call for as well. And I am here to join Mayor Turner, albeit virtually, in this call. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that in the year 2022, we are seeing the vestiges of Jim Crow once again. More than 50 years since the assassination of Dr. King. And as we observe his memory, I hope that folks this week will remember and recognize that the attacks we're seeing on voting are but a thinly veiled attempt and successful, really, efforts at suppressing the vote. More concern as well to the fact that ultimately the voter suppression legislation that has passed, the confusion that it's causing, the suppression that it's leading to, is a step toward hijacking our democracy, hijacking trust in our electoral systems, which is something all of us should be instead working to protect. What we're seeing here in Harris County, in Texas, particularly in this community, in the number of rejected ballots, the percentage of rejected ballots should be a warning sign and a call to action to the entire nation, and specifically a wake-up call for folks in Washington who say they support free and fair elections. Because of the new laws that passed the Texas State Legislature this past session, Harris County is flagging for rejection 35% of mail ballot applications. Percentage-wise, we are rejecting between around 7 times more mail ballots than we did before in a similar midterm cycle. So if this 35% of mail ballot applications are being flagged for rejection, if the numbers hold, and we have the same number of vote-by-mail applications we did in 2018, which was the last midterm election, this would be a conservative estimate, we would end up rejecting, or at least flagging for rejection, 27,500 applications. That is more than enough potential voters to sway the outcome of an election. And I think the folks who passed those laws at the state level and who are defending them now know that that is the case. This is the very real impact of the big lie on Harris County and on Texas. And that's why we need the cavalry from Washington to join us by passing voting rights legislation. We're doing our part. We're fighting in the courts. We're fighting to expand voting locations and hours. We're printing mail ballot applications to provide them to the voter registration groups that are now not receiving them from the state. We're helping people try to cure their mail ballots so they're ultimately not rejected. But it's not an easy thing. People throw their hands up in the air. Every time we take a step forward, the forces of the past try to cut us off at the knees. We won't let that stop us. In the spirit of Martin Luther King, we have to remember that obstacles did not stop him, or generations of activists since then. And that's why we're working to make the same innovations in voter registration as we've made on voting access. The sad part is that the confusion itself is suppression. The fact that right now there are so many reports about ballots being rejected, about what information you should and should not submit. Seniors are told all the time not to share personal identifying information like social security numbers, and now their mail ballot is being rejected because they didn't put one in their application. It is confusing, and confusion breeds apathy, and it breeds a lack of participation, and it weakens ultimately our democracy. And so while we continue to fight this, while we continue to do everything we can to help people fill out those applications and walk through the hurdles, there's a couple of things that the community can do as well. If you're submitting a mail ballot application, make sure you fill out your contact information. That way our Elections Administration office can contact you if there's anything missing and try to cure the ballot so that we don't have to reject it. File the voter registration cards and your mail ballot application forms early. The deadline for mail ballot requests is February 18th, but you don't want to wait until then because, as you see, almost over 1 in 3 applications are having to be flagged right now for rejection. A large part of those will ultimately have to be rejected. And ultimately, don't be discouraged. We cannot allow what proponents of these bills are trying to do to actually happen, and that is to discourage voters, to discourage participation. Senate Bill 1 intended to make it harder to vote, and we will not let that happen. Let me take a brief minute also to announce a new agreement that we've reached with the judiciary and under the leadership of our district clerk, with the support of our county administrator, a solution to jury assembly. As a reminder, jury selection for our courts had been taking place at NRG, in part in light of the pandemic, but our lease expires in February, so we had to find another space to make sure the wheels of justice could keep turning, that we could adjudicate the backlog of criminal court cases that we've had since Harvey. So thanks to the work of the district clerk, of our judges, of County Administrator Barry, we are preparing to move jury assembly back downtown to the newly repaired and renovated Jury Assembly Plaza. Beginning February 6th, the jurors will assemble there where there's plenty of room with 6-foot social distancing. And then if they're selected for voir dire, they will proceed to other county facilities that also allow for proper social distancing for the voir dire and then the jury service itself in the trial. In conjunction with our partners at the City Permitting Office, we are working on renovations at an expedited rate to make sure all of these different facilities are ready to go to protect the health of jurors, to minimize travel time for lawyers, for judges, for defendants, for everybody involved in the system, and to make sure that we continue getting through that court backlog. So I want to thank the judges, Clerk Burgess, the County Administrator Barry, and the City of Houston, who is helping us with this and with the permitting. I'll repeat in Spanish, and then we'll hear from Commissioner Ellis, from Clerk Burgess, and Administrator Longoria. El alcalde Turner y un grupo de alcaldes de alrededor del país se reunieron hoy día, este momento, en Washington, D.C. y están pidiendo legislación, leyes que protejan el acceso al voto en nuestro país. Me uno a esa llamada desde aquí virtualmente, me uno a todos estos alcaldes y a nuestro alcalde Turner. No creo que sea una exageración decir que en el año 2022 estamos todavía intentando quitar rastros de la era de Jim Crow, cuando era imposible casi el voto, la discriminación. Este año que celebramos a Martin Luther King Jr., a todo lo que él logró, debemos recordar que lo que está sucediendo con el ataque al acceso al voto son intentos de limitar la participación y son pasos también que ponen en peligro y pueden intentar derribar nuestro sistema democrático, nuestro sistema de votación, de participación democrática. El rechazo de boletas en el condado Harris debe servir como una llamada de atención a otros condados, a otros estados y líderes a través de nuestra nación, y además debe servir como un llamado de atención a aquellas personas en Washington, D.C. que dicen que apoyan las elecciones libres y justas. Dada la nueva ley que pasó la legislatura estatal este octubre del 2021, el condado Harris está teniendo que marcar para rechazo un 35% de las solicitudes de voto por correo. Si ese número se mantiene constante y recibimos alrededor del mismo número de aplicaciones a voto por correo que recibimos en el 2018, o sea, la última vez que tuvimos una elección de mitad de periodo, rechazaríamos 27.500 aplicaciones a voto por correo. 27.500 votos pueden decidir quién gana y quién pierde en una elección. Y es bastante obvio que las personas que pasaron estas leyes y que las están defendiendo hoy día reconocen que esa es la verdad y ese es el resultado que están buscando. Este es un impacto muy serio de la gran mentira que el expresidente ha venido repitiendo y repitiendo, intentar convencer a la gente que hay algún problema con nuestro sistema electoral. Es por eso que necesitamos que Washington se una a nosotros para aprobar legislación, para proteger el derecho al voto. Estamos trabajando día y noche para hacer lo que podemos por parte nuestra. Estamos luchando en las cortes. Estamos expandiendo horarios y sedes de votación. Estamos imprimiendo aplicaciones para votar por correo, por lo que ahora el Estado no ha recibido suficientes, no ha producido suficientes para los grupos que registran a votantes. Estamos intentando llamar a cada persona que envía una aplicación de voto por correo que pueda ser rechazada, a ver cómo los ayudamos a enviar una aplicación correcta. Pero es difícil, es complicado, muchas personas se dan por vencidas. No vamos a permitir que esto nos detenga. La realidad es que la confusión en sí es lo que causa que las personas no participen. Si tanto uno escucha el no votar, el que las aplicaciones se rechazan, el que es difícil el proceso, que tiene tantos obstáculos, menos quiere uno participar. Entonces, vamos a seguir trabajando en eso. Para los votantes, estas son las recomendaciones. Cuando llene su aplicación de voto por correo, ponga su información de contacto, su número de teléfono, para que si necesitamos contactarlo para clarificar alguna duda, podamos hacerlo. Envíe su aplicación lo más pronto posible. La fecha límite es el 18 de febrero, pero como ve, estamos rechazando más de 1/3 de las aplicaciones. Entonces, es probable que haya que rechazarla de usted. Con eso se da tiempo para poder volver a enviar la aplicación. Y no se deje, no permita que lo que está sucediendo lo prevenga el mandar una aplicación, el querer participar, el querer votar. Sé que es confuso. Pensemos en las personas mayores de edad. Se les dice a cada momento, no compartan su número de seguro social. Es peligroso. Hay muchas personas sin escrúpulos intentando robar la identidad. Y ahora se les está pidiendo el número social en las aplicaciones al voto. Entonces, entiendo que es confuso, pero tenemos que trabajar juntos y no dejar que la meta de esto gane. Es decir, no dejar que esto prevenga la participación democrática. Muy brevemente quiero anunciar un nuevo acuerdo que hemos alcanzado con la rama judicial para el tema del servicio del jurado. Por la razón del COVID, hemos estado llamando a las personas que se invitan a participar en el jurado al estadio de NRG para que allá puedan reunirse con más espacio de distanciamiento social. Lastimosamente, ahorita en febrero expira el acuerdo que tenemos con NRG, entonces teníamos que encontrar una alternativa. Gracias al administrador del condado Berry, al District Clerk Marilyn Burgess y también a nuestros jueces hemos encontrado una solución. Vamos a mover el servicio de jurados, el proceso de selección de jurados a la plaza de reunión de jurado que está recientemente renovada aquí en el centro de Houston, en el downtown. Hay suficiente espacio ahí para que haya el distanciamiento social de 6 pies. Ya que usted se ha elegido para servir propiamente en el jurado, entonces se le llevará a otros edificios del condado, a otras instalaciones donde también hay espacio, que son muy seguras y que ya hemos trabajado con tanto los jueces como los abogados, como la ciudad de Houston. Entonces quiero agradecerles a los jueces, a la District Clerk Marilyn Burgess, a la ciudad de Houston y también a nuestro administrador Dave Berry por ayudarnos a encontrar esta solución. Si recibe una invitación para participar al jurado, por favor hágalo. Tenemos muchísimos casos atrasados que están esperando ver la justicia, el que se resuelvan las cosas, y para eso necesitamos que participen todos los miembros de la comunidad que pueden ayudarnos con los jurados. I'll pass it on to Commissioner Alice.
Thank you, Judge Hidalgo, and thank you for your leadership. 2 great announcements. I'm so glad under your leadership we're going to get that jury assembly room back up and running again. I also want to congratulate you for joining the mayor, who, as you said, is in D.C. for the Conference of Mayors. It is in the great tradition of Martin Luther King that you are protecting our democracy. I was in D.C. for the march. I saw Martin King in Atlanta when Commissioner Garcia and I were there in November for a NACO, National Association of County Officials Conference. And I told him I would come. I had no idea it would be so cold in Washington, D.C. By the way, he was a county official. I remember when my old boss, Congressman Leland, asked me to help raise money for him to run for Fulton County Commissioner, and he won as a very young man. Didn't like it too much to get one term. It was a great march. I saw a lot of old friends there. And I was reminded how King's movement was very much analogous to a symphony. In fact, some of the old timers, Andrew Young and Jesse Jackson, also talk from time to time about the 4 movements in a symphony. The second movement, by the way, was to give people who didn't have the right to vote the right to vote. There's no mistake what people are after when they try and put more restrictions on us in Texas. The Houston Chronicle had a great quote, which I just love, basically saying that in Texas, people have been complaining about voter infringement since the freed slaves were given the right to vote. In Texas, it's no accident that we rank 42nd in total statewide voter turnout at 61.2%, which exceeded the 51.4% voter turnout in 2016. We invested a record amount of money in Harris County in trying to make it easier for people to vote. And here we are now with a new variant where all of these challenges and restrictions were placed on urban counties like Harris County in Texas in particular. So Judge, thank you for your leadership. I know you and I are going to do a telephonic town hall meeting, I think. I'm taping the recording. I'm going to do it tomorrow night to let people know what they can do. But this fight is so important. And I can't imagine, over 50 years after Martin Luther King was assassinated, here we are still going back to the second phase, the second movement in his symphony, the Civil Rights Movement. First was for public accommodation. Second was for the right to vote. It is embarrassing. And I'm glad we're going to do as much as we can. I hope the Senate will pass the bill. I hope that we'll get a good history lesson on how many times the filibuster has been changed historically, over 160 times, because that bill ought to pass. With that, I'll bring up Clerk Purchase.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellis. Just like the right to vote, you are guaranteed the right to a trial by a jury of your peers as a citizen. And so we need you, if you receive a jury summons in the mail, to answer that summons and to show up for your day of service. We will be leaving NRG on February 1st. That will be the last day we have jury calls out there. We'll resume jury service downtown at the newly renovated Jury Assembly Plaza on February 7th. If you get a summons, you'll be directed to go online to pre-register or call our office to pre-register, and at that time you'll be given a date, time, and place to show up. We'll be doing 3 calls a day, one at 8 a.m., 10:30, and 1 p.m., in order to be able to call at least 525 jurors per day. So if you receive a summons, we're asking you, please respond and show up and help us deliver justice in Harris County. Thanks.
Isabel Longoria, Harris County Elections Administrator. Just want to reiterate the points today. As we get more mail ballot applications, we are seeing just a steady percentage and number that we have to flag for rejection. We're doing everything we can to call voters, to email you, to make sure that we're researching every database that we have now or that the Secretary of State makes available to us to help every single voter really cure their mail ballot application. So as we fluctuate between the 16 and the 30%, what I really want to get across is this is a bad number. Call our office, 713-755-6965. If you have any question on what information we have on you on file so that you can put the correct information on your application, we can tell you what number. We can't tell you what the number is. That's for you to give us. But we're here to help you every step of the way, and we're pushing the Secretary of State to make sure they're making available every single tool so that we can help voters. And I will say this is just the mail ballot application so far. We're flagging those applications for rejection. If we can't reach you by phone or email, we do have to send you a letter. Don't forget, as the judge said, you've got to get those applications in by February 14th. As we start sending the actual mail ballots here in the coming weeks, this will be the same issue to look out for. Make sure that you are including the same Social Security or driver's license number that you did on your application or is on file, so that later we don't have to then question, flag, and reject potentially your mail ballot. So again, call us, go online, find every information you can so that we can help you make sure your mail ballot is counted.
Any questions?
What are the common reasons it's flagged? Can you give us like the top 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So the top reasons are people just are not including a number. This election, the primary election, is the first election that Senate Bill 1 that was passed by the legislature just this fall is in effect. So for the first time ever, mail ballot voters are saying, why do I have to include this? As the judge pointed out, especially with our seniors saying, I don't feel comfortable giving out my sensitive information, especially by mail. Since our office is no longer allowed by law to send out mail ballot applications, a lot of these are coming from campaigns. And people are saying, I'm getting some from a candidate I don't know, from a party I don't know, it's not one I affiliate with, I don't want to give them my sensitive information. Or a common issue we're seeing is they provide us their driver's license number, but when they registered to vote decades ago, they gave us their social security number. We have to then go see if we can match any of those numbers in our records, or if not, we have to get them to resubmit their application with the number that we have on file. Those are the two biggest ones we're seeing. That's what it truly falls to in that bucket. You get a small little things that we see from every election, but I can say definitively the increase we are seeing is as a direct result and consequence of the passage of SB 1 this past fall.
And I want to add something about the forms themselves that we were just talking about. Is there's a change in the forms, and so some folks might submit the form that they had submitted in the past. There's a long form, there's a short form. The form before didn't ask for the social security number, now it does. So sometimes they just write in their social security number on the old form. I mean, there are plenty of states where they have much clearer systems for voter registration for the request of mail ballots, and as here, as everywhere, there are no systemic issues with voter fraud or fraudulent registration. So this is very much a solution in search of a problem, and unfortunately, it is causing extreme confusion and very real numbers of rejections.
Judge, how much harder would it be for Texans to vote in the March primaries?
Well, it's beginning now, even with the mail ballot request portion. So even if you just start there, right? We're saying if you extrapolate from the numbers in 2018, and that's assuming that we'll have the same number of people request mail ballots as they did 4 years ago. That's unlikely because the electorate has grown. So this is probably a conservative estimate. You would have almost 30,000 people whose ballots are at least flagged for rejections. We have the capacity and the will to call each of those folks that we can reach to try to help them either resubmit the application or make sure that they understand why they need to provide their social security number and try to ease their concerns. But number one, not everybody is gonna pick up the phone, wrote down a phone number, or is gonna be willing to go through the hurdles. And number two, not all the counties have this capacity or this attitude. Because of the rhetoric, there is the sense of, well, if they didn't submit it, too bad. And so you're talking, thousands and tens of thousands of folks who are used to voting by mail, who perhaps can't vote any other way, whose applications are being rejected. I'll tell you, I used to vote by mail when I was a graduate student, a busy graduate student. It was the only way I could have done it. There was no way I could show up in person because I was living for the period I was in school out of state. I was registered to vote here, my permanent residence. If this had happened to me, I wouldn't have been able to vote. Then we have the seniors. They may have transportation limitations. They may have physical limitations. They're simply used to doing it a certain way. Folks with disabilities, you name it. It's something that at this day and age, as Commissioner Ellis said, in this day and age, we have figured out ways to make sure that voting is secure and also accessible. And unfortunately, the politicization of this issue means we're going backwards, back to before Jim Crow.
What have you heard about the paper shortage in the Secretary of State's office, which may affect the printing of voter registration cards?
I'm hearing from groups like the League of Women Voters, different organizations that help with voter registration, that they were expecting voter registration cards from the state that they're not now receiving. And so there is another source of confusion. If they go online and print a form, could they print the wrong form and then they're registering people for mail ballots with the wrong form or to vote with the wrong form? So we're working on printing forms ourselves that we can then distribute to those groups, but the situation is not ideal. I think there may even be some lack of clarity as to the form itself, so I'll let Isabel Longoria answer the question in more technical detail. But to not get into the weeds, fundamentally what's happening here is a maze of technicalities that seek to entrap people into not being able to vote. And we, as offices that are dedicated and have a charge to facilitate elections and voter registration, we ourselves are struggling with it. So what do you say of the busy person who's simply trying to cast a vote? Administrator Lindbergh.
Absolutely. And I want to add this in context on voter registration. Texas is only one of a handful of states, I think 7 or 8, that does not offer online voter registration, nor do we offer online mail ballot application submission. So this is where it's coming to a head, as we've shared for years. Online applications allow people to have access, whether it be a pandemic or paper shortage or anything else. We're fortunate here in Harris County, thanks to the judge and the commissioners, that we've had the foresight and the resources to look ahead, to order ahead of time. We don't anticipate any paper shortages affecting us for the March primary because we are such a large county who has access to those big printers. Same for the voter registration applications. We've got resources in our warehouse right now that we are ready to deploy. We're literally counting every sheet to make sure that and see if we can help some of our community groups who have been turned away by the Secretary of State. And we are also prepared to say, hey, if you send us a voter registration application, whether it is an older one or a newer one, if you send us information by law, the exact requirements that you need, we can accept your information to register to you to vote. So as with everything else, send us what you got, right? Send us what you got with the numbers you have, with the form you have. I am deploying, and thanks again to the judge and commissioners, every resource we can to make sure that voters are not caught up in this. But at the end of the day, we are going to see a percentage of folks who are confused by these new voter registration laws, are confused by the mail ballot applications, and ultimately the mail ballot process.
What should voters be doing today to ensure that their vote counts in March 1st, that they're able to vote?
Today, register to vote. Do it as soon as you can. If you plan to request a mail ballot, request it today as soon as you can. Assume that there may be something missing, that you may have to do it again. Know that we're going to be there to hold your hand every step of the way, but do not wait until the last minute. Normally we say that just in the hopes you won't forget. This time we say it because there's a system that's been designed to err on the side of rejecting a valid voter's application, a valid voter's right to vote. And so given that that's what the system is now set up to do, we need to give a little bit more time for us to be able to fight back against that. And the way you help us is by doing things early this time around.
Why is the March primary so important?
Voting is always important, and really, it's both parties have their primary, and it's crucial for the right candidate, the candidate that reflects the values of the community. The way that the community elects that candidate is when they turn out to vote. And so it's better for everybody to see participation. It's just the way democracy works. Democracy depends on our participation, and if people cannot vote, they can't participate. So however you vote, whichever primary you're voting on, whichever primary candidate you support, just participate.
Yeah, it seems like every time we have an election or a primary, it's more important than the last time. And it seems to be tuned to this fact.
Well,
really important.
I mean, the reason we find ourselves here is because there are legislators, in particular at the state level, but certainly leaders at the national level, who are cynical enough to put their political aspirations ahead of our democratic values and our treasure as a nation, which is democracy. And so if we don't participate and make sure that leaders respect democracy and democratic principles, we're only going to see more of this. So tying it into this issue, yeah, voting is more important than ever so that we can elect folks who protect democracy.
Any more?
Have you guys reached out to other counties, and if so, are they finding the same kind of numbers of rejections?
We are in touch, I'm always in touch with other county executives, and what I hear is the confusion, the concern. How can we help voters submit applications that are going to be valid under this new system that is designed to help them fail? As far as the comparison with numbers, I'll see if Administrator Longoria has something to add on the specific numbers.
Yeah, this is not. This is an issue that we're seeing across the state, as I hear from my election administrator peers. Harris County is actually doing slightly better. I can point out a couple of things. For one, we do a custom designed mail ballot application. You can see on our website where we went through a very thorough design process, kudos to my communications team, asking ourselves, how can we make it more reader-friendly? How can we make it more user-friendly, especially with all of this new information? I think that's helping lend to these issues that people can really walk through step by step. Again, we've been empowered to have the resources and the will to go above and beyond in researching a voter's records to find where maybe one day 10 years ago on their voter registration card they put a driver's license or social security number that would still count so that we can approve their mail ballot application. I also wanted to touch upon the idea of why this election is so important. Again, this is the first election that SB 1 is in effect. This is the first election where we're seeing the changes to the mail ballot applications, to the mail ballots themselves, to the assistant pieces about who can assist or help voters when they go vote in person. We will not have drive-through voting. That has now been banned. We will not have 24-hour voting. That has now been banned. We have our expanded hours only until 10 p.m. So this is going to be a pretty big shift from when voters are used to in Harris County of knowing we're going above and beyond to provide them those access and resources. We have none of that. I'll get a little nerdy for the folks who are interested in too. This then feeds into the gubernatorial election coming in November. That has vast implications for voting. Whoever wins the gubernatorial, whichever party wins the gubernatorial election, then becomes the presiding judges at locations for the next 4 years, and it has some trickle-down effects when we're talking about elections. So again, it's not just that it's the first election under these new laws, some of which we still have not received guidance from the Secretary of State on poll watcher training, on some of these nuances. It's being rushed in the middle of a pandemic with these supply issues for a critical election that has lasting political implications for Harris County and the state.
And one more time with the numbers for people to call in case they got questions.
Absolutely. If you have any questions about your mail ballot application, about your voter file, or updating your voter registration, call us at 713-755-6965. That's 713-755-6965. We offer assistance in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. And if there's any other language you need, we have resources to translation services to help any voter that calls us.
Okay, thank you very much. Congratulations. Thank you.